Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Kozlowski. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today is the 5th installation of WTG's Tech Talk, and this one is on the digital workspace. My slide will cooperate here. There we go. So just a little bit about Winslow Technology Group. So we're headquartered out of Waltham, Massachusetts. We have offices in New York City and Charlotte. We specialize in solutions from desktop to data center to cloud, whether it's virtual, hyperconverged, a data protection backup project, anything along the lines of mobile, desktop, endpoint, and then a full suite of professional services and cybersecurity. You'll see a whole bunch of these like products and solutions as a theme throughout this presentation. Our approach is we just try to identify game-changing technologies and then really deliver unparalleled technical experience around that. We're really happy to do demos, proof of concept, support user groups, and at the end of the day, our customer satisfaction is the _1 thing that's important to us. In terms of industry recognition, we're a Dell Technologies Titanium partner. We were awarded Partner of the Year last year for Dell Technology. We're a VMware Master Services Competency Partner. I'm proud to say that we've received several awards from Arctic Wolf the last couple of years, and just recognized by different trade organizations and whatnot over the years. So digital workspace, let's just kind of dive right into it. And if as we go along you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and we'll come back to them towards the end of the presentation. So first up, like, what is digital workspace? I actually really like VMware's definition of it. So VMware defines digital workspace as a holistic change in the way end user services are delivered by IT, allowing IT to deliver the apps and data employees need to work across any device. By taking advantage of today's cloud-based management technologies, digital workspace solutions deliver out-of-the-box experiences that scale across platforms, location, and device ownership models. So there's like a lot to unpack there. Some key words that are important to me and what really brings digital workspace together, I highlighted in yellow there. So end user services. So I think digital workspace is focused on the end user. Oftentimes in IT and as technologists, we're focusing on, what's the core network, what's behind it, what's on the data center, things along those lines. So this is definitely focused on the end user. It's not about delivering applications either. It's about delivering data. Like we'll talk about it in another slide, but consider today, with workforces working at home, it's like pretty slow. If you gave everyone just a VPN connection to access SIFT shares and pull files down that way, like it's a pretty miserable way of doing file sharing. So a modern digital workspace has different aspects and angles of delivering applications and data. And then there's the notion of across any device. Especially as we've evolved over the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen folks, leveraging devices from traditional laptops, your MacBooks, things along those lines, but also leveraging things like Chromebooks, the multitude of iOS and Android-based devices. So really this whole notion of like any device, any app, anywhere, really embodies the notion of digital workspace. So digital workspace has been a thing for, in many ways, years now. I mean, we've had products that unify applications and data to a single web point for a couple years now. Every year for the last 15 years has been, quote, the year of VDI. So that's exciting. But enter 2020, and like digital workspace really takes off. So I just pulled some stats that are specific to COVID response and coronavirus and this whole notion of digital workspace. 88% of organizations have encouraged or required their employees to work from home, and 91% of teams in APAC have implemented work from home arrangements since the outbreak. So that's pretty incredible. I mean, like, everything's changed like in the last 6 to 8 months, and that's a huge number of like rapidly shifting technology and really driving towards embracing this notion of digital workspace. 31% of organizations surveyed in this particular study said that coronavirus was the trigger to begin allowing remote work for their company. So what does that mean? That means a third of all companies didn't even have a remote work plan. They had no notion of this. It was more traditional with like, here's your PC, you sign into your corporate network and kind of go from there. From an executive perspective, 71% of executives are worried about continuity and productivity during the pandemic. I think that's absolutely true. Like, how do you both enable people to keep the business running and keep them productive, really, and engaged all at the same time? A lot going on there. This one actually dates back to 2019. Gartner did a study then. So 54% of HR leaders indicated that poor technology and/or infrastructure for remote working is the biggest barrier to effective remote working in their organization. So I couldn't think of a need driving a true digital workspace experience more than, you know, employees going to HR basically saying like, I can't work from home because the technology stinks. We break down the digital workspace experience into a couple of themes. The first theme that I'll talk about is security. This was a really interesting kind of article written. It's published on Dark Reading. There's a link there if you're interested in reading it. So this was earlier in the year. This is related to you know, a large phishing scam. So over a 24-hour period, Microsoft detected a massive phishing campaign using 2,300 different web pages attached to messages and disguised as COVID-19 financial compensation information that actually led to a fake Office 365 sign-in page. So, you know, what a great, compelling way to essentially trick users into giving up their information. And candidly, does this apply to the digital workspace or kind of like that remote workforce specifically? Maybe not, but this whole combination of a different environment, the whole notion of the pandemic behind the scenes, and then this just massive attack that was like really specific to something as important to folks as financial compensation. So just a really, really interesting stat. So what do we do about it? First, Winslow Technology Group suggests that security really be the #1 priority when considering any digital workspace solution. So like it all goes back to cybersecurity and ensuring a safe experience for the user and for your data, your systems, and your organization. So what does this mean and what does this include? So top of mind is like you still have to patch all these devices, right? So cloud native patch management solutions for all of the OSs. So that's Windows, Mac, and Linux. The whole notion of having a device on your network that you can easily patch at all times, or sort of easily patch. I mean, patching is kind of a pain in the neck anyway, right? Like that problem got exponentially more difficult when people went home and maybe they're not VPNing in every day, or you don't even have a VPN capability. You still need to at least you know, check on the patch status and manage patches for all those devices that are interacting with your systems and with your data. As folks went home, we see an embracement of more BYOD models. So this is, you know, we didn't have enough laptops, or the laptop availability was too short or too tight. We just couldn't get them in time. So we're letting people use their, you know, their iPads, their Android tablets, Chromebooks, things along those lines. You still need to have a way to ensure that simple things like passcodes are enforced in those. So having some notion of mobile device management for BYOD platforms is like incredibly critical to the security aspect here. When it comes to, you know, allowing remote access, and this certainly applied prior to this remote workforce and the digital workspace experience, but it is an important part in securing the whole experience, right? Is making sure you have solid multi-factor and maybe even conditional access solutions in place to really secure that remote access to your applications and data. Credential management, you know, maybe someone in the office was writing their passwords on a sticky note and sticking it under their keyboard. Super bad thing, like definitely not something that should happen, but does. If you're doing that at home now, and people have maintained that practice at home, now you've essentially like broadened the reach of those Post-it notes from the physical office to someone's home and whoever the visitors and other folks are at that place. There's been a strong focus on, you know, doing, you know, detection and response at the corporate network level. So maybe that's monitoring firewalls or having special devices that can sniff network traffic, you know, outbound to the internet. But once endpoints are kind of out there, and you're really embracing this digital workspace model where folks can use any device, anywhere, and anytime, just having that notion of truly centralized inspection and detection kind of goes away. So you really need a solution that looks at your network and the networks that are coming into your environment and things of that nature, but also has a really strong focus on endpoint, and wraps that solution not just with endpoint detection and response, but like a managed detection and response where your solution is taking security telemetry from endpoint data and network data and kind of correlating and really helping to identify security events. Having proper identity and access management, critical. That really goes along the lines of the multi-factor and conditional access, but really making sure you understand who's on and off your network at all times, because again, we're much broader than the reach of our corporate walls. And then as we send folks home, try as we might to encourage or enforce data storage in things like Box or OneDrive or things of that nature. People still store stuff on their machines, and it might need to be backed up and have some level of data protection. So having a backup and data protection strategy that aligns with your digital workspace strategy, especially considering endpoints are in the field, is really critical to really securing the data and ensuring data protection for your environment. Certainly, this is not an exhaustive list of all aspects of workspace. Security as it applies to the digital workspace or the remote workforce. But these are some highlights we thought we would share. And at the end of the day, we do suggest that security be your #1 priority when considering any digital workspace solution. So the next theme is connectivity. So just a couple stats here, and this one was from 2019 and one was from earlier in 2020. So 42% of enterprises report that at least half of their distributed international workers suffer consistently poor experience with the SaaS apps they use to get their jobs done. So that's a pretty high number. So that's just poor experience with SaaS apps, usually internet delivered. But definitely speaks to a connectivity and bandwidth concern for sure. And then 81% report that it's important to adopt tools and techniques to address network latency issues that impacts Microsoft 365 performance. So what's interesting about that is we're talking about tools for monitoring, techniques for addressing, and then network latency specifically impacting 365 platform. There's no doubt that 365 is kind of a ubiquitous tool for collaboration, whether it's Teams, various voice offerings wrapped into some of the 365 plans, and then even just leveraging some of the 365 apps for email and collaboration. That becomes a critical spot to manage, and a lot of this starts with ensuring connectivity at home. So in this theme, there's a couple, kind of sub-themes, if you will, of, items that we think folks should care about. So the first one is having some notion of centralized and organizational management or at least providing requirements for bandwidth for folks that are going to work from home. And really the good and the bad of that is if you're in a relatively urban, suburban area, it's usually not a problem. You can go to Verizon or Comcast or Optum, Cox Cable, whatever, and you can get some pretty solid bandwidth up to a gig now in a lot of places. But how do you support folks that may be in some rural area where they're just limited to LTE bandwidth? Maybe that's needing to not just provide a notion of well, this is the bandwidth that's required, but here's how we're going to help that endpoint or that user through this digital workspace really optimize that to make the best use of it. Another aspect here is managing kind of the corporate on-ramp for access to applications and data. A popular way to do this was like a backhaul VPN. So basically, if you want to have a remote solution, fantastic. Here's a laptop, it has a VPN client on it. Maybe we've configured it so that every time you're not on the network, there's some awareness to that endpoint and it always VPNs back home. That way you can access the corporate applications and data relatively, with relative ease, but also as an administrator, you could inspect and wrap some security and monitoring around that traffic. That's really difficult now. I mean, there's concerns around, overcapacity VPN appliances. just slow performance. Maybe there's not enough inbound or outbound connectivity to handle that connection. So one area that we're helping customers with, candidly, is moving away from that backhaul model to either a cloud native VPN. So that's using basically like a cloud firewall or a cloud solution to provide that type of access, so that there's just many more distributed kind of points of presence for that VPN connection to terminate, or no VPN. So leveraging more secure SaaS applications that really don't require a traditional VPN that was once needed. As we're talking about, managing, it's easier to manage things if you're able to monitor them. So we need to monitor our critical services. So from you as a provider perspective, a corporate provider of corporate applications and data and systems, how are you monitoring and applying some quality of service to inbound internet bandwidth? How do you know about application performance on the back end to ensure that the experience from folks, in this digital workspace world are having the same experience that they would have had, or as close to as possible as if they were on the corporate network? And then in terms of device capacity, so going back to the backhaul VPN, what if your VPN concentrator just doesn't have the horsepower to kind of keep up with the number of users that you've sent home? How do you monitor for that type of thing? So there's just some examples of monitoring for critical services. And then when it comes to inbound ISP, so this is your organization's on-ramp in a way to the internet. So this is taking inbound connections from your users. What happens if you have an ISP failure? What do you have in terms of redundancy, and what automation have you wrapped around that? So if something does happen, something on a systems basis automatically takes over and handles that failover from one circuit to another, or is intelligent in terms of load balancing. So there's a bunch of technologies here, from kind of the tried and true BGP. There's DNS-based solutions, and then from a firewall, and especially if we're talking about the cloud native VPN, there's a whole bunch of other options that really can help load balance, or maybe even in some cases eliminate the need to worry about this notion of like backhaul or inbound connectivity. The second theme here is operational support. So 74% of companies plan to permanently shift to a remote workforce post-COVID. That's a lot, and I think we all can agree that things have changed, and things will go back to some semblance of normal, but what we're in now is certainly a new normal. So when it comes to operational support, some things that we like to consider here are, if we're talking about any device at any place, that means that your help desk is going to have to support unpredictable and non-uniform environments. So maybe your help desk is supporting someone at home. They need to know a little bit about Wi-Fi and like, where's the router placed, like, do you have line of sight? So that means like you're going to have great 802.1a connectivity or not. Maybe the router or wireless is somewhere buried in the basement, and you have to help someone try to position themselves or the access point a little bit better to have better coverage. So these are all things that help desk technicians never had to worry about. It was basically like, is it jacked into the corporate network? Fantastic, let's troubleshoot this a little bit more. So really, and I'll little personal shout out. I feel for them. Early in my career, I did dial-up tech support back in kind of in the late 90s, and like, whew, there's a lot going on there. It was tough to support people over dial-up modems back then. Anyway, back to the notion of active monitoring. This is so you can establish a baseline and manage a quality of service end to end. So from the person's endpoint all the way up to the applications and data they're accessing in the data center. How do you know you're delivering and really from an operational perspective, providing access to the applications and data that your digital kind of workforce or remote workforce using this notion of digital workspace entails? What about maintenance considerations? So there's new considerations with folks kind of working with any device, any place, any time. You may need to take parts of your environment down and plan that a little bit differently than before. Like maybe the non-redundant VPN concentrator that you have was fine before. It was like a nice to have, but now it's become a critical piece of your environment. So how do you perform maintenance on that? Maybe it means you have to instill some high availability and understand how you can fail over certain parts of your environment to to perform maintenance, so applying security patches and whatnot on them. You also may need to have a different way to manage incidents that suddenly impacts a really large and diverse population of users. So I'll pick on that kind of VPN concentrator. It's a super simple example, right? If that went down, now you cut everyone off. You can't easily go to someone's desk or go downstairs and have even an effective war room maybe in that case. So really the way that we manage incidents from an operational perspective with this new kind of population of users, and I'll say new not because it's new. I mean, we've been VPNing in and using VDI for a long time. It's the sudden like in rapid expansion of that population that makes it kind of a more impactful problem than the past. So productivity. This is not a high-tech thing, but it's important. So I like to pick on like the small laptop and like the multi-display problem, right? So Dell has a really great product line actually of monitors. They have some really beautiful displays that are rich in color, easy on the eyes, and a whole site kind of devoted to this. So there's a blog post on one of their sites. It's called Maximize Remote Work. And some quotes from that. So monitors are an essential tool for an effective work from home environment. They can improve your employees' work experience, boost productivity, and be a smart health investment. And then investing in the right monitors for a more comfortable working environment at home will reap returns in the long run in terms of overall health and work productivity. And I agree. I mean, if you were sent home with the tiny laptop with the tiny built-in keyboard and the touchpad that folks like myself with like clubby hands just can't really navigate like a mouse, they're not going to be anywhere near as productive. So making sure there's a functional, digital workspace wherever folks happen to be is really important. So maybe some considerations for this home office productivity would be that whole notion of small laptop with a tiny keyboard, tiny monitor, touchpad, like versus a docking station with multi-monitors, a real keyboard, and a real mouse. Huge difference in how productive somebody can be there. I mean, imagine, going from the 2 monitors or a large 4K monitor where you can have 2 spreadsheets or 2 documents open at the same time, and now you're maximizing nightmare, not something long-term. When it comes to providing telephony or like a great audio experience, that's certainly important too. Maybe it's more of a call center app, and just like basic telephony is not enough, and you need to invest and really understand quality and ensuring folks are as productive as they can be with their phone. Same thing with Zoom. So Zoom and kind of video. Data sharing. So from a functionality perspective, we talked about this a little bit. If you're doing like CIFS file sharing over VPN, like that's probably going to be super slow, especially as you like ramp up like hundreds or even thousands of users on that VPN. So having an effective way of doing data sharing is pretty important in terms of providing a functional digital workspace. Then we have client server apps. So again, like running that kind of thick client server app over a VPN, like it may not even work. Like some applications are so sensitive to that, they just don't really work well. So you may need to invest in a VDI or kind of remote desktop solution to host applications like that. And if you do, of course, there's always a catch to that too. Delivering kind of a rich, graphical, kind of snappy user experience, which is almost imperceptible to running it locally, can be really important to ensuring like a functional digital workspace for folks at home. There also may need to be some considerations for specialty device attachment. Maybe there's some specialized like scanners that can do, I don't know, like I guess you probably wouldn't send someone home with like a driver's license scanner because they wouldn't really have a way to be scanning licenses, nor would you probably want them doing that from home. But point being, there may be some specialty scanners for document scanning or things along those lines, just a simple example. But supporting different types of physical device attachment may be critical to having a functional digital workspace. Collaboration. So this is like huge, right? We're kind of doing it right now in a way. This is a webinar, which certainly predates COVID, but interesting stat. This was in April, so this was kind of like as we were hitting the peak in kind of like the Northeast anyway. The use of video conferencing is exploding as Zoom reached 200 million daily participants, both paid and free, up from just 10 million in December. That's a huge increase in 4 months, right? Huge increase. So collaboration is more than just Zoom though, right? I mean, it certainly is delivering like that excellent like real-time audio video, whether it's Teams, Zoom, WebEx, RingCentral, you know, whatever. There's a whole bunch of platforms. And you know what? Everybody complains about all of them. So if you're on Teams, for example, and everyone's like, oh, maybe we should get Zoom, blah, 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 try it out. But honestly, we've heard, you know, people having issues with this, issues with that. The whole point here is do the best you can to deliver like the best real-time experience for your teams as possible. Having high quality telephony is important too. There's nothing more kind of irritating or annoying than having like a really choppy phone call. It's almost like the opposite. Well, it's certainly the opposite of productive, but it's like even worse than that. It's like grating, right? Secure instant messaging. So, you know, having people instant message on open platforms may not be what you want to do, and you may need to have a way to back up instant message and retain some of that for like legal reasons, perhaps. Content collaboration. So this is where we've seen, you know, Microsoft 365, G Suite, and other applications that allow a kind of multi-reader, multi-writer access to working documents, whether it's Excel spreadsheets or, you know, some kind of presentation. Like content collaboration is huge. Collaborations become important in terms of enhancing team performance, so making sure teams are still productive, and engagement. I mean, if we didn't have things like, you know, like Zoom and things of that nature, it may be difficult to ensure that we're engaged with our teams. So I'm going to close and then open it up if anyone has any questions. Basically, in summary, I think we can all agree kind of this new remote workforce using this digital workspace is really here to stay. I mean, it's going to change a little bit, you know, or a lot of it over the next 6 to 8 months as vaccines and whatnot roll out. But certainly the investments made now are here to stay. It's really hard to imagine, you know, a recent time when technology was really so critical to maintaining some semblance of normalcy. I don't know what would have happened over the last 6 months if we didn't have reliable or relative reliable home internet access, for example, to keep in touch with, you know, colleagues and even family and friends with Zoom. I'd like to argue too that digital workspace, whether you're leveraging this notion in the office or out, really is the enabler to making this all happen. In closing, and I'll open it up to Q&A, I do want to offer, WTG offers a remote workforce assessment. It's delivered no cost, no obligation, takes about 20 minutes. And at the end of it, you receive an insightful report based on a lot of content that was actually in this webinar. It also gives you the opportunity to ask one of our engineers, you know, questions, you know, related to your digital workspace or whatnot. So I'd like to say thank you, and I'm going to look at the panel. We have a question, what do you recommend for securing users' laptops? So I think there's a couple things there. One is making sure you have solid endpoint protection and some either EDR or MDR, so you're actively managing it, you know, wrapped around it. But certainly there's other important aspects to it as well, like using the multi-factor authentication, using maybe the cloud native firewall type technology, and then using some kind of cloud native method to you know, patch that device. So having a way to make sure the device itself is secure. And we're right up on time. There's a couple questions. I'm going to follow up with those folks by email afterwards. But with that, I'd like to say thank you so much. I really appreciate it. The rest of the Winslow team does, of course, as well. And remember, we have the WTG Remote Workforce Assessment offered at no cost, no obligation to you, and we're happy to conduct it anytime. Just contact your account exec for more info. Thank you very much, everyone.